So sometimes we're verbal processors. We can come up with stuff and we need to verbally process to move us forward and get us out of our head.
I remember so many times at work where I've started sending someone a message, and after I read it, after I've sent it, I come up with the answer before someone's even said anything.
Meditation, you're completely right, Devin. Like, the thing to do is just do 5 minutes, right? Or do 3 minutes, do 2 minutes, whatever doesn't feel overwhelming. We all think, oh, I'm too busy for this. Well, are you too busy for 3 minutes? Are you too busy for 5 minutes? Like, if we get stuck in the thing of, I shouldn't have to do it, I shouldn't have to rely on this tool, I should be able to do it on my own. Again,
there's that word.
Yeah, shoulding on ourselves. Should.
I haven't think about that one in a while.
Shoulding all over ourselves.
Welcome back to another episode of Late Not Less. I'm your host, Devin Pitts-Rogers, and I'm joined here by Attention Different host, Aaron Smith. Aaron, how's it going today?
Pretty good. So for the listeners who may not know me, I'm the co-host over at Attention Different podcast. I'm also a co-founder of Attention Different, and I run a coaching and therapy practice called Potential Within Reach. So I'm an ADHD coach and a licensed clinical social worker.
Aaron and I got to talking. ADHD coaching is something that is always going to be useful for folks, in my opinion. And it might make sense to field some questions for some folks that are listening, just seeing if there's some strategies that could be helped or better facilitated by getting some input from an ADHD coach.
Sounds good. Well, I'm here to help. What questions do you got for me?
Okay, perfect, because I have a list. These have been things that I've explored in my past, and I think that some of these can be very relatable. The first one I have is, I'm sometimes slow to act because I overanalyze. How do I stop overthinking? And that can be in my professional life, my personal life, even just having those moments where you're interacting with someone in a public space and you start wondering about how maybe you might have come off a certain way. And now, next thing you know, that's been dominating your thoughts for the last 10 minutes. How does a person stop overthinking? Well,
let me just ask you this, because what do you think the root is of overthinking, or your overthinking? Are there multiple things, or what do you think is at the root of it?
I think it can be fueled by coming from an anxious place. The idea that your brain is trying to race through multiple scenarios. Maybe you're trying to think of, how do you navigate a worst case scenario? It could be that maybe you're thinking about how maybe it's not as bad as a worst case scenario, but you're also just entertaining all of these possible outcomes, even when you don't really need to think about any one of them.
Yeah. So anxiety, worry, stress, like these are usually the precipitating factors that go on in our brains that put us in this place of overthinking and overanalysis. Obviously, with ADHD, we do have an overactive mind, so it's easier for us to go down those paths of thinking about things and ruminating about stuff. But I think, like, at the core of it, when we overthink things, a lot of times it's self-doubt, insecurity, or this worry, anxiety kind of state of mind. The reason I bring that up is because I think it's important to understand and underscore what is at the core. Because when we think about what to do or how to stop it, if we don't understand where it's coming from, then it's hard to know where to intervene and what to stop. Like, what are we actually stopping? Because sometimes we get confused and we might think, oh, I'm stopping the thought, or I need to just make a better plan. I need to do something more to, like, stop this thing. And sometimes that's true. Like, if you're stressed about something, yeah, maybe come up with a plan or a plan of action, some kind of way to approach it. And that can relieve some of that anxiety, worry, or stress. But oftentimes the overthinking is rooted in something that might not even be real. It might just be in our heads. It might be kind of our own overanalysis. Like, I was just meeting with a client right before we hopped on. He was telling me about this incident at the DMV where he'd been putting it off for months. It was like he had an expired tag and he had to go get it renewed. And he was saying it's been months and months and months. And what he was telling himself, the story he made up in his head was, this is going to be so long. It's going to take all day. I'm going to get in there. It's going to be so hard. It's going to be all of these things. He made the DMV into this nightmare scenario in his mind. When he looked into it and when he actually went to do it, he realized he didn't even need to go to the DMV. He just needed to bring in this little mailer kind of thing that they send you. And he went to like King Soopers or somewhere else and got it done. And he said that like the process was way easier than he had built it up in his mind. And that's just an example of how an ADHDer can go through and build up all of these anticipatory anxiety, make up a bunch of stories. And the reality is much better and not actually what we're thinking is going to happen. That's like the first thing, is that we need to realize that is that like the overthinking is out of touch with some of the reality, and our self-doubt, even self-criticism can get in the way. And what we need to do is kind of learn to trust ourselves a little bit better. If you can think to yourself, well, I need to have some sort of a plan. Usually that's okay. Like you want some sort of a plan, but do you need to have the perfect plan? Do you need to overthink it and come up with all of the scenarios? Or do you just need a basic plan and then trust yourself enough to be adaptable and to roll with whatever goes on?
I will say I did have to go to the DMV 2 weeks ago, and there was a turkey that was walking around the entrance, and that was definitely something I hadn't planned for. But luckily, it showed up after I got there and got in line to replace my license, and then it just kind of wandered off before I had to leave. But that was strange, and I don't know how people just plan for the DMV. It sounds like you just hope for the best, but you don't overthink it. You just have a very bare bones plan, and whatever happens, happens.
Well, okay. So here's a real world example around that, right? Instead of imagining scenarios in your mind, where can you find information that can clarify that? Okay, maybe I go to the DMV's website. Maybe I search on there, what's the process for renewing whatever it is that you're trying to do. Now, we all know those websites can be notoriously bad and hard to navigate. So, okay, if that doesn't work, spend 5 minutes with that, let that go. Now maybe we use Gemini or some AI, right? Do a quick search. What are the steps I need? What's the process? And even just having a basic idea of what to do now, a path forward, that starts us being able to reconcile in our minds, okay, this is what it actually is. So I can get out of my head and start to have some sort of semblance of a plan. Doesn't have to be the perfect plan, just a semblance of a plan. And now I have a choice of, okay, can I tell myself, all right, let's trust in our instincts here and our ability to deal with challenges and approach the situation? Or do I lean into the overanalysis and avoid it further? And I think like what we can do to stop the overthinking, because a lot of times when we're in our head, what we're activating is what's called like the default mode network of the brain. And that's the place that has this ruminative kind of spirals of thoughts. And what we want to do is activate the task positive network of the brain, the TPN. So we want to get out of the DMN and over in the TPN. And the way to do that is actually writing it down. So maybe you read that stuff on the website or get it from your AI tool, and then write down a few action steps of just like, okay, first I do this, then I do this, then I do this. Now your brain isn't just like operating in this way of I'm thinking. It has something more concrete to focus on, which is an actual written step-by-step kind of thing. So that's one way to actually stop that rumination cycle, is to move it from just thinking about it to writing it down.
Not gonna lie, I haven't actually thought of that one before, but I think that one can be useful in my professional life. I've had that issue where if something feels too ambiguous or not clear enough, then my brain starts racing in a million other directions. But if I start trying to get things to words, even in the form of just sending someone a message on like Teams, for example, that can help my brain sort of figure out a way to go forward. Or, maybe it just helps my brain pump the brakes while it waits for clearer directions. But I remember so many times at work where I've started sending someone a message, and after I read it, after I've sent it, I come up with the answer before someone's even said anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so sometimes we're verbal processors. We can come up with stuff and we need to verbally process to move us forward and get us out of our head. I know that's true for me a lot of times. Like if I'm in a state of feeling like I'm stuck, but I'm not quite sure where or why I'm stuck, and there's ambiguity there, if I verbally process it and I just have a conversation, it could be with a coworker, a friend, someone where I'm just explaining the problem. Half the time I realize even just like me getting into the problem and describing it to them, I start to come to those answers naturally. And I'm like, oh, I see the process. I see the problem differently because I'm having to describe it to someone else. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, because I would be asking someone at work for something Salesforce related, but there's somebody who's not on the project. And so when I have to fill in all of those gaps in knowledge for someone else, sometimes it paints a clear picture for myself. So once you've helped somebody understand what you're looking at, you start thinking of how someone else might approach it who hasn't been in it for like the last 3 hours straight. And that can be super helpful when just trying to think. It's almost like I don't want to say body doubling quite, but it feels like in the sense that you still are using the presence of another person to think through a scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not body doubling, but what it is it's like it is using the energy and the input from the other person in a similar way to body doubling where they're working on a task or they're around. So you're feeding off of that energy. I think it's just like it's processing and verbally explaining the ideas. We have to restate it. And that helps our brain to reorganize the information in a different way to move past some of those blockers. I even see this in therapy, right? It's like that's also why therapy works. Is because if you've ever thought like, well, why is going and talking about problems or telling someone stuff, why is that helpful? It's because a lot of times we've been holding on to things in our mind and remembering it and saying it to ourselves one way. But then when we have to actually tell a therapist and they frame a question a certain way, and now we're answering their question, by having to put it into that framework and fit the story that we've been telling ourselves in our own head into that framework, we start to tell it slightly differently. And then from that, we almost like it forces us to come up with a different perspective on the issue itself. And we're like, you know what? I hadn't thought about it that way. You asking me that question, of, well, what happened there? Where did that come from? Or what were you feeling in that moment? You're like, I didn't really think about that. So that's actually why it works, is it brings us out of this patternistic way of thinking that our brain gets locked into and puts us into a whole different frame of mind.
It's almost like getting a record player to stop skipping the needle in that one groove where it's just gotten stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You move the needle, right? You move it, you readjust it slightly. It's still on the same record, but now it's playing a different track.
Yeah. And I think that's just largely helpful. I probably need to figure out more windows during my day to sort of proactively do that.
Hey, Steven here. Sorry to interrupt. We just wanted to take a brief moment to tell you about this week's sponsor. At Attention Different, our mission is simple. Offer ADHD adults proven practical strategies for living a more balanced, fulfilled ADHD life. And that is why we are thrilled to offer our latest course, Thriving with Adult ADHD. While other courses might focus on the pain and struggle of being an adult with ADHD, and we do not want to minimize that, this course is designed around accessible, relevant, and applicable techniques that address the most common challenges facing ADHD adults. Inside Thriving with Adult ADHD, you will learn how to get organized by building routines and habits to bring structure to your days, create time management systems that are realistic and effective, You'll learn to shift your mindset beyond survival mode and instead focus on personal growth. Thriving with Adult ADHD features 2 hours of on-demand video, 10 downloadable resources, lifetime access to the material, and a satisfaction guarantee. Go to attentiondifferent.com/thriving to sign up now. That's attentiondifferent.com/thriving to sign up now. Hey, thanks for the quick break. Now back to the interview.
And as a part of that, I've got another question. And this is one that is also being proactive in how my brain thinks or does too much. And it's basically just this. I want to practice being more mindful so I can get my brain to slow down. And what do you recommend to get started?
Well, mindfulness, we need to define what that is, because a lot of people might hear the term mindfulness and they might think, is this meditation? Is it having to do with Buddhism? What is mindfulness exactly? Or being mindful? And the way that I simply try to define this is it's just present focused awareness. Simple as that. And what we want to do is actually be more present in our lives. And it's a state of being. It's really actually not a doing of something. It's activating and being in a state of being fully present and aware of what's going on in front of you. So whether that's being with the person in front of you, a friend, in a meeting, with your partner, a loved one, with your children, spending that time and being fully present and your mind not thinking off and being on to some other thought pattern or track, or you're thinking about what you want later, what you're doing tomorrow, or the thing that was undone on your to-do list. You're focused on who's in front of me and what am I actively engaged in? What activity am I engaged in right now? Where are you at with it? Have you practiced, tried any sort of meditation, or have you tried any sort of techniques in the past? Let me know just first, so I can gauge the spectrum of your own experience.
Sure. I have done some mindfulness meditation before. I was actually thinking about earlier this week how I'd like to get back to that. My trick is I need to structure it into my day. If I get up in the mornings, I might have hit snooze too many times, and I'm thinking, oh, well, I need to rush through that. I think for me, it'd probably make more sense to have that as a sort of wind down exercise. But another thing that I use, which is sort of useful for productivity, we've talked about it before, is just Opal. And the reason why I like that is because it blocks apps that you're trying to keep from accessing, either during your workday or for whatever the case may be. But the cool part there is that it can help you be more mindful, obviously. But when you have apps on your phone that you check habitually and you're blocking them, you also start to realize how often you pick up your phone as sort of like these little inconsequential gestures. We live in an attention economy, so there's a lot of competition to get your brain anywhere but being in the room at that moment. And I would say that I could probably benefit from doing that at home a little bit more often. I do it during my workday, no problem. But if, let's say, for example, Sam and myself are out on a date night, I can put my phone down and be in the moment because I'm trying to remember an experience and I'm trying to make those minutes count, as it were.
Mm-hmm. And when you were doing some mindfulness practice before, were you using any other kinds of apps? I mean, Opal is kind of a browser blocker or app blocker kind of application, which helps you to focus and not be distracted, kind of preventing distractions. But in terms of things like Calm or Headspace or Insight Timer, I'm just naming out, different types of apps. Have you ever tried any of those?
I think I used Insight Timer before. The one that I am curious about, again, because I found out that due to my employer provided healthcare, for whatever the reason, the version of Cigna that I have includes a Headspace membership. So in the past, I had done Headspace as well as Calm, just in different eras, not at the same time, right? And I did find that having those meditation scapes were super helpful. I know that one of the things that I tried for a while was having the wind down exercise on Headspace. So when you're having a hard time falling asleep and having somebody sort of imagine, energy, or almost like a light moving from, the bottom of your foot through to the top of your head. So I've used a lot more of that stuff for falling asleep. I have done Headspace a little bit for meditation. I think one of the things that I need to remind myself is that I don't have to set aside 10, 15, 20 minutes to meditate per day. It can be as little as 5. And if you're still setting aside that time, that's what's most important instead of comparing it to how you feel it should be, because should is just a dangerous word for any sort of self-care or self-improvement.
You can say that again. Yeah. So meditation, I want to separate here for a second, because I did kind of lump these two together, because there's mindfulness practices that then are formal types of meditation settings or carve out times where you do like 5 minutes of a guided meditation. And that's meditation, right? That's like I'm using an app or I'm using this kind of thing. It can be guided, it can be unguided. There's all sorts of different practices of meditation. It's not a one thing. There's a lot of things. And if you go to any of these apps, they'll give you some different options. You'll see different ways and different types for different types of ailments and things you're dealing with. I think in general, though, if people are just trying to find a way to get started with being more mindful, meditation can be a little intimidating. It can be this like, where do I even start? How much do I do? Is it effective? There's a lot of doubting and kind of even perfectionism that comes into play when you're thinking about what is it supposed to be? Well, the first thing to realize is mindfulness is something we can do throughout the day. We don't have to change anything about our actual flow of the day or the tasks that we're doing. We can be more mindful of any task, even the most basic things. So whether that's I'm loading the dishwasher, I'm folding my clothes, I'm driving to work. There's lots of periods where we do these routine things that don't take a lot of like mental effort to have to like do, but we can kind of like, we can bring our attention and our awareness to that activity. And it's even especially good to kind of do this with things that are displeasurable and stuff that you don't like, because you might find that it actually shifts that. I've done this with clients around dishes, because dishes is one of those things that a lot of times people just don't like to do. And if you can approach the dishes in a way of being mindful and accepting right off the bat, I'm going to be present with it. I'm going to try to be as mindful as possible as I'm doing these dishes. By approaching it and not avoiding it and just accepting the state of it, and it is what it is, I'm doing this thing. It's weird. You find that like you notice certain things, or your brain calms down. Things start to slow down. You'll notice the water, you'll notice the bubbles, you'll notice kind of this repetitive motion of scrubbing. Some of these sensations and things that you can bring your attention to get you out of your head of the resentment that's there of, oh, I have to do this. And that's another thing that we'll come back to later, is this like idea of having to do something or not. But I just suggest people, the first step is, if you want to be more mindful and do this, weave it in. Just be more intentional about weaving it in throughout your day. Go for a walk and be mindful. Like put down your phone or don't have any form of entertainment for a little bit. See how that is. Just go out and like listen to nature, smell some flowers, listen to the birds chirping, play with your dog, play with your kids, and like don't have a distraction. Any of those types of activities can be opportunities for mindfulness. Now, meditation, you're completely right, Devin. Like the thing to do is just do 5 minutes, right? Or do 3 minutes, do 2 minutes, whatever doesn't feel overwhelming to do it. Just do that. Because we all think, oh, I'm too busy for this. Well, are you too busy for 3 minutes? Are you too busy for 5 minutes? Like weave it in. And usually I do recommend people try to do it in the morning. I know that can be tough, especially for like night owls or folks who have any sort of sleep issues, like the morning can be a difficult time. But, you know, if that's the case, maybe do it midday, like during lunch or something, you know, doesn't have to be bright and early first thing. The issue at the end of the day, and it's still okay to do it at the end of the day too, but the issue with it is you've had a full day of activating your nervous system and a full day of all the other stuff that's come up. And it can just make it a little bit more challenging, especially for people at the beginning, because now they have all of this stuff that they're thinking on. It's not their brain isn't as fresh. Now, the point of meditation isn't to clear our minds. Let's get that out of the way first. Like, that's a misconception. It's not to clear your mind. It's actually to pay attention to whatever comes up. So however many times you get distracted or whatever thoughts that arise, there's no wrong way to do meditation. It's whatever happens, whatever feelings or thoughts that arise, I'm just bringing my attention to that, breathing through it, and allowing that to be, right, in my awareness. And then bringing my attention back to some anchor, whether that's the breath or a sound or whatever other source there is. But oftentimes with insight meditation, it's just bringing your attention back to the breath. So what that trains our brain to do, and it actually is one of the most effective things to help strengthen the ADHD ability to focus and sustain our attention. I compare this to kind of like weightlifting or training for the brain, because you're doing a mental rep of my attention has drifted for a moment. It's starting to think about something, what I want to eat tomorrow, what that task I left undone, that email I need to answer, what I said to that coworker earlier today. And then what you do is you notice, oh, my mind went off on that. Okay, bring it back onto the breath, right? And so that's a rep. And actually it's a good thing. So the more it gets distracted and the more thoughts or the more feelings that you notice, the more practice you're getting, the more reps you're getting in. So it's a way to reframe that, because I think a lot of people get dissuaded by the fact of, am I doing this wrong? Is my mind supposed to be clear in this Zen-like state or something? No. If you have a lot of thoughts going on, this is actually good. It's really good practice. It's strengthening that ability, which we need more of as ADHDers.
That's a good point. I think for me, and this was something that I've noticed with at least the sort of initial sort of period on stimulant medication, was feeling that while my brain would become, unfocused, I would think about these other things, my brain would sort of immediately snap back. And I found that with time, and it could be through any number of stressors, maybe it's the, decreased efficacy of the medication. Maybe it's just, again, the fact that we have so many more things competing for attention, or it can be paying too much attention to world events. But all of those things kind of causing the brain to be in a little bit of distress, and finding that new tactics are sort of needed to sort of recompile that resilience. That's just something that I feel like I've sort of noticed in recent years. I've taken more steps in terms of self-care, forcing myself to acknowledge when I maybe need to take a break from something at work because I'm not going to figure it out. Whether it's that or figuring out that, maybe I do need to just remove some distractions and just allow myself to work on something with having just the right tools in my toolkit to help me, help me power my way through.
So with that, like, what's the hardest part for you about those things you're just mentioning? What's the hardest thing, the barrier for you?
It can be, I guess it would be, sometimes it just probably makes more sense for me to have like my phone turned off. It can be that, I think that would probably be the biggest thing, just because the ways in which I communicate with people are just scattered across so many different platforms. Whereas like years ago, you could just talk to someone by text and you didn't have to check one of like 3 or 4 places. And I think for me, sometimes it helps to just not check those things. It's if anyone follows me on Instagram, sometimes it might take up to, in some cases, over a week before I respond to a message, just because previously when there was less of a segmentation in how people communicated, I think for me, I was able to respond quicker. And I have this policy thing where, and it could just be because I'm a sensitive boy, but I tend to try and not leave people on red. So I won't open a message more often than not unless I'm in a position to respond to it. But then that also would create moments where there's a sense of obligation. And when you have, a dozen messages on Instagram versus, a group text in your text messages versus a group chat and Signal. And I've had to force myself to acknowledge that people will reach out if there's something that is time sensitive. Otherwise, like for a lot of these things, I'll get to them when I get to them.
Mm-hmm. So having some boundaries and probably also like knowing where to start and not letting your brain get distracted and spread so thin amongst too many different channels, too many different devices, applications. That divides our attention. So that's like, it's like the opposite of mindfulness is when we're pulled in all these different directions. And I'll just say this because it's like we're in a world right now where there's a lot of things happening, a lot of changes. There's a lot of stuff happening with AI that's just like every day you're hearing new stuff going on, and this is dropping, and this is changing, and this development. So there's that, which can be exciting and scary and all sorts of things in between those. And then we have the world events and politics and things like that. That's like can be disheartening and it can be again scary and fear inducing and can be stressful, and we're all going through like some social vicarious trauma in some ways of having to experience all this stuff. And that's why I think like for this purpose of this discussion, it's like I think the best thing we can do is do some detox of our devices and phones, like digital detox. Take a digital detox. That's one of the best things we can do for ourselves, and weave that in, and it pairs perfectly with mindfulness. These techniques were developed way before any of these smart devices or computers. The Eastern traditions where a lot of this stuff comes from, and it also, it's part of all sorts of other Western religions too, including Christianity and Islam. There's all sorts of practices that incorporate ideas of mindfulness and meditative types of practices. It's a good time to practice this because you don't need any of those things to do it. So even those apps, you don't need Calm, you don't need Headspace. Sometimes those can be helpful. They're entertaining. They guide you with some pleasant music and some things. But we can just sit there and be with our thoughts and our breath and be mindful of how we're feeling. We can go for a walk. And I think movement is especially important. It's vital for all of us to get a little bit of exercise, right? So like go for a walk and don't take your device. You're actually doing double duty there because you're helping yourself both get a little bit of exercise and blood flow going, but you're also getting off of the device for a little bit.
Well, it's a nice way to have a reminder that the world kind of keeps turning. I know that there's a part of you that obviously wonders, like, is there going to be an emergency while I'm out without my phone, however briefly? But that can also be easily hijacked by a feeling of FOMO, or this idea that a non-essential communication that you still want to see could come in at any moment. And I think it's important, to your point, to really set aside some time to just be.
Yeah. And set up something if you're really worried about that, set up something so someone knows where you're going, or I'm just going over here. I'll be over here if you need me. Mm-hmm. But, for the vast amount of history, there was not cell phones and not instant communication, and people got by. Sometimes things probably went awry and didn't get handled when it needed to. But most of the time, the fear of this is an emergency is actually more of a fictitious like fear in our mind than it is a reality. It's like the world is not probably going to end on this walk, but if it does, maybe I can get back to checking the news, checking in 20 minutes. Like a lot of times we can give ourselves a little bit of a reprieve and the consequences aren't going to be dire.
I wonder if folks had that same anxiety around urgency when folks were still using carrier pigeons, which I did learn in recent years. Part of the reason why they don't seem as intelligent as a lot of other birds observed in the wild is because of the domestication efforts that we put in to use them as messengers. And then my understanding is as we started coming up with other forms of communication, we just relied on them less and less. But, you know, they didn't exactly go feral and find ways to just kind of go back to another way. They just kind of stayed as their sweet, uncomplicated selves.
That's a fun fact. What other questions do you got for me here?
Oh, well, we are going to come back to the one around chores. This is one that we talked to. I've actually made some progress for myself, which I think is rad. But I remember talking to you about this like a long time ago and feeling like you were asking me to look left and right at the same time, but finding myself stuck in patterns where I do chores because I feel guilty about the state of the space around me and trying to figure out how to break that cycle of guilt. That can be something that other folks are still struggling with now.
So your question is around feeling guilty if you don't do the chores that you think that you need to do, kind of like guilt tripping yourself into doing that stuff?
Yeah, like only doing them because you will feel worse about not having done them, which was an area that I had struggled with for a while. And I don't want to spoil anything yet, but I figured that would be a useful thing to talk through.
Yeah. So you've come to something that is better about this that you can share. Okay. Well, without knowing exactly what that is yet, what I'll say on this topic is the reason we're doing the chore, we need to reframe that, because the reason is not about I have to do it. You need to shift it to this place of I want to do it. What are you getting out of doing this task? Because of course, if it's something that you are telling yourself you have to do to be a functioning adult, to be responsible, to whatever the thing is that you're saying, you're going to want to resist that. Your brain doesn't like to feel forced into doing that type of stuff. So we can work with ourselves to figure out, how do I talk myself into doing this and reframing the task itself? Like, I want to have a clean house. It provides me with this benefit, or whatever. The thing we don't want to do is kind of like, by doing the chores, it makes me feel less anxious, or it makes me feel better about myself. It makes me feel enough. Like I'm a good partner. I'm a good whatever parent. That's dangerous. That's probably not the right thing to do.
I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah, because that borders on this like toxic self-care that, you know, when we talked at our recent Chad panel, which you were on, Devin. So if anyone wants to see that, it was on burnout, languishing, and toxic productivity and flourishing. We cover a whole large ground there in our hour plus presentation at Chad 2025. So check that out. It's on our YouTube channel if you're interested in that. Attention Different on YouTube. But we do talk about kind of this concept of toxic self-care. And I think that borders to what you're saying directly, of like guilt tripping myself and getting stuck in the cycle of guilt is a form of toxic self-care. If everything we're doing is like, I have to do this, and this could be with meditation, it could be with mindfulness practice, it could be with doing the dishes or chores. Like, don't come down hard on yourself for not doing the thing and tell yourself I have to do it or else. Instead, think about like, well, what is it that I want? What benefits me when I do it? How do I talk myself into it? Talking yourself out of it is easy. Talking yourself into it, that's the real thing to do. Talk yourself into doing the task. And here we'll also think about like the why, right? Motivation. Sometimes we ask ourselves why, and it can be a really powerful thing. Like Simon Sinek talks about the power of why and knowing your why and that type of stuff. Who also has ADHD, by the way.
Okay.
But this is not that type of why. This isn't that type of why. This is the why where we're saying it in a judgmental way, right? Why didn't I do this? Why do I always have to do the dishes? Why is it so hard for me to do the laundry, or to why can I start it, but then I can't put my clothes away? Have you done that, Devin?
I can wash all the same. It's the folding and placement of laundry that can become a little bit more difficult. I was actually thinking about doing some folding and some placement after dinner this evening, not even because of a feeling of guilt, but it's like I'll be hanging out with Sam on the couch. We'll probably have something engaging on TV, or something just engaging enough that I don't just stop folding laundry to watch it, but it's still entertaining. And it's kind of coming full circle because, I mean, I'm sure it's no surprise. I don't know if you can actually see it in frame, but I have a display case with a bunch of anime figures in it because I watch a lot of anime. And years ago, I would fold my laundry while I watched anime. And that would be sort of that, I don't want to say meditative practice, but in some ways it sort of felt like one. And so I have found for myself sort of aligning those things that I became stressed out from like 2019 through until, I don't know, like early last year, maybe late 2024. But finding ways to align those things with things that I enjoy or that I'm looking forward to is a nice way around it. So for me, I had listened to music pretty regularly, almost constantly. And like this weekend, I was doing meal prep for Sam and myself because I'll make our lunches for the week. And then I was mopping, and I've started listening to an artist by the name of Masayoshi Takanaka, who's been around since like the 70s. But I'm just listening to that while I'm doing these things. So it doesn't, if I didn't enjoy meal prep, then I would have while doing that, because there was something pleasant. So my brain is more sort of fixated on the pleasant sensation of listening to that music, enough to the point where if there's anything laborious or tedious about doing meal prep or mopping the kitchen floor when I was done, those things just didn't register to me.
Yeah. And that's another tactic. Like what you're describing there is temptation bundling as a strategy. You're doing the things that are entertaining and pleasurable along with the things that are necessary and the things that are you don't prefer, the non-preferred types of tasks. So you're mixing the two. Like I'll get to watch this anime show and I get to fold some laundry. And then it actually, like, again, it gets to the I get to, right? I get to watch my anime when I do this. So we combined and conflated those two concepts pretty nicely there. Another one, which is probably going to tee up a little bit our next topic, I think, but you know, Ryan Mayer usually does, I think it's on Tuesdays, if I'm not mistaken. Ryan Mayer, who we've had on the podcast, a friend of the pod, and he's an ADHD coach himself. He does this thing, folding with friends, and he streams it live where he's folding with his wife, and anyone that wants to join in can hop on and do it too. So it's a great way to have that fixed time to do your folding if you're like Devin or a lot of other folks out there who just are like, you know, it's tough for me to pick the time and day and when to do it and have that support. Well, here you go. You have that accountability and that body doubling because they're doing it too. Takes the shame out of it and makes it so much more rewarding to do it as a community. And Ryan's actually he's funny, he's hilarious, so he probably is very entertaining the whole time too. So
might have to see if I can catch that stream. Yeah, I might have to share that with some other neurodivergent folks as well. Just like you pointed out, the sort of question that I had immediately after that is how can I add accountability to the things I need to get done? And this can be still a little hit or miss for me, but I've made more progress than not. You know, we had already talked about it a little bit earlier, but body doubling. I'm sure you can talk to that way better than I can as the professional here in the room.
So have you tried out, what have you done yourself to try to layer in accountability, find different sources of accountability?
Obviously, removing temptation, but Focus Mate is usually the one that I'm pretty vocal about. That is a website where you basically can either just jump in ad hoc or you can schedule a meeting in advance, and they will pair you with someone in the world. So you might even get paired with someone in Europe, and maybe you're trying to study for an exam. So I have to do Salesforce certifications, for example. And you have other people who they're like, yeah, I'm just cleaning my office, or I'm also studying for something, or I'm trying to read books more frequently in my year. And so it's just any number of people that need someone else to be present, because the way that it'll work is that once you get placed in this session with another person, you both sort of explain what you're working on for that time. There's different intervals that you can be plugged in for. But the idea is that you'll mute your microphone and keep the camera on. So there's this expectation of, we know that you're going to be focusing on the thing that you are here to do, but on the off chance, I'm going to have my camera on so that you can see that I am working on the thing that I said I'm here to do. And then at the end of those sessions, you kind of compare notes and you wish each other well. And if you have a good experience with someone, you can favorite them. Then it increases the likelihood that you're paired with them in future sessions.
Yeah, FocusMate is one of the most powerful tools that's out there. There's a few others, Flow Club, Worksitter. There's Adult Study Hall. That's another one. Eric Tivers runs out at ADHD Rewired. He's another friend of ours.
Cool.
An ADHD coach. But they all have a little bit of a different way, different platform, different model, but they're all essentially body doubling tools and all very helpful. And I think on this, the biggest hurdle people have, besides just like trying it out and realizing it's not as awkward as they think it's going to be, that it's probably someone else around the world that needs the same help. Maybe they're ADHD or neurodivergent themselves. And so they're not judging you just as you're not judging them. So it's not as awkward as you think. But besides that, the other hurdle, I think, is people sometimes just think to themselves, I should be able to do this on my own. Why do I need some tool or something like FocusMate to help me? And for that, I would say us as neurodivergent folks, I'm putting myself into this category. What helps us is embracing and admitting to ourselves, accepting fully that I'm going to do what works regardless. If it works, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the judgment out, the shame out. I'm going to do what works. If it works, do it. And that's what I've come to. Because like, if we get stuck in the thing of, I shouldn't have to do it, I shouldn't have to rely on this tool, I should be able to do it on my own. Again,
there's
should. Yeah, shoulding on ourselves. Should.
I haven't think about that one in a while.
Shoulding all over ourselves. Yeah, it's not a good look. Don't shit all over yourself.
Yeah, it gets messy.
It does. It's not helpful. If we can do stuff with supports and accommodations or in a team way, right? Like no one actually does things alone. Think about any business, any CEO who's at the top of a business. Do you think that person, even though like, let's say, I don't know, I'm just going to pick a CEO who everyone knows, right? Let's like say Sam Altman, not that we're endorsing him or anything, but just saying like, Sam Altman, right? CEO. Do you think he's doing things by himself? Did he single-handedly form OpenAI? No. Is he even like responsible for probably a lot of the development of it? No. Like, why do we feel like in our own lives we have to be the hero in this hero's journey and like do this all on our own? And it might be the Disney movies or the films that we watched when we were young that imprinted that in our brain. But we're not alone.
Rugged American individualism.
Yeah. If you're listening to this from a different country, you might be like, yeah, these Americans, yep, they think everything has to be about them and they have to do it on their own. Pull yourself up from your bootstraps and pick yourself up and get after it.
Yeah. Institutions can't fail people. Only every struggle is a unique moral failure. There's no institutions that have failed people. But I digress. You can't accept that you can rely on help from others, and even just having someone in the room can be enough to keep you on that path, especially when your thoughts wander. If someone else is there, it can be a nice reminder of what you're doing. I mean, I work from a coffee shop that is a block from our house for a couple hours, like one morning every week. And because that change in scenery also means that the things that sort of become distractions being in my office, well, those things aren't there. And I'm surrounded by other people who are also trying to be productive, whether it's people having meetings with colleagues, other people that are working as, individual contributors on any number of things. And it's just super helpful to have other people in the room.
Great. I love that.
I will say there's one other thing, and I haven't plugged it on here, but another friend of the show, but ADHD Central. One of the issues that I've been running into with reminders for things, so tying into accountability, is that if I had a reminder on my phone, it is a 50-50 chance that I actually see it because it doesn't stay front and center on your phone. It just kind of can blend in with other push notifications. So maybe it's a thing that just due to the timing of you opening an app, it just immediately disappears. Or maybe you're waiting for like an authentication code for work, so you end up just swiping out of it. But what ADHD Central has done, which has been pretty useful, is having these cards where you can write down your daily routine and your to-do list. And I will leave those on my keyboard, for example, so that I have to engage with them in some form, shape, or way. And because I now have this written ledger of something that I need to attend to on my desk, I have a higher likelihood of going back and getting it done because a recurring reminder is going to still have the same issue on my phone. Whereas if I look at this thing, when I have a moment, when I had it written down on a card, I can just go, oh, that's right. And when I have a moment, just pivot to it and just knock that thing out.
For sure. And it also, in addition to it not being as distracting as your phone or you don't have to pick up a device, the other benefit to it is it helps to encode it into your memory because the process of writing it down actually helps with our working memory. So a lot of people with ADHD have weak working memories. And
Can't confirm.
Yeah. And so, I do both. I think a lot of us do both who are in this realm of, how do we act as high performing ADHD people out in the world and in the workplace? We do have to manage multiple types of things like a to-do list and a Slack channel and a digital calendar. We have all these other things. I use Todoist. I also have a kind of sticky note application that I have on my computer that kind of shows up. So if I have an idea or something I don't want to forget, I'll brain dump it usually into the sticky note app. The one I use is just called Nice Sticky. You can get it free on the App Store. But I like it because it stays on top of the other windows, and it's just
nice.
It's so easy. It removes any barrier. It's not, you don't have to open it and wait for it to load or go through a bunch of screens. It's just sticky note. And I like it too because it even if you delete it, you can find the deleted stickies later if you ever need to go back to it. Oops, I deleted one. And I usually use that as the brain dump. But then if I'm actually going to do stuff throughout the day or I want to write down some of my priorities, I'll literally write them down on a sticky note or one of those cards. Or I have a few different types of ones here. Let me see. I have to-do list, that's broken down into different categories. I have ones that are sticky notes with lines and boxes that you can check off. So I love having physical analog systems as well. And I'm constantly using those too. So I'm a huge fan.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised at how much easier it is for me to actually circle back. Work jargon. It's fine. It's whatever. But returning to things that I reminded myself earlier in the day that I needed to tend to. And there's not really a feeling of shame or guilt. It's just, it feels a lot more matter of fact, which is, I think, great for breaking those habits around guilt spirals.
Mm-hmm. It just is what it is. And here we go. I can come back to it.
I want to do one last question. I think we can compare notes on it because I've been making progress. And I don't know if it's just because I've been working on, kind of coming out of burnout and making more time for things that recharge my brain positively besides just saying screw it and going to sleep. But the question I have written here is, I need help forcing myself to admit when my workday is done. What are some ways I can try getting myself to acknowledge that I'm in a good place to log off for the day? Especially for folks that are working remote where you don't have to factor in traffic. So when your commute is sort of divorced from your workday, it can be harder to log off because maybe you're just trying to do one more thing, maybe respond to one more email, or maybe you're building something and you're trying one more adjustment. And next thing you know, it's been a couple hours.
What have you tried so far? Just briefly, if you want to tell me a few strategies you've tried that have maybe worked or not worked, and then I'll jump in with a few others.
Sure. I'm not sure if I have a one-to-one strategy that I can say.
Oh,
I just feel like I've been more honest with myself,
okay.
because since I'm on the Salesforce side in consulting, it would often come down to me trying one, like a configuration adjustment, seeing if that would work. And then if it didn't, keep working and trying to get that to work because I think I've almost got it wrapped up. And I think as of late, it's been more of the idea of I will be able to get back to this tomorrow. I know that if I need to, if I think I am on the verge of figuring it out, I mean, you can also try to give yourself a paper trail of what you were working on. Maybe, if you have the flexibility, maybe you create a screenshot, but you can write the instructions. You can try to document enough things to keep it, sort of fresh in your mind for when you get back to it the next workday. I think for me too, part of my struggle was because I'm in the mountain time zone. A lot of the client work that I do is on East Coast time. So anything that I don't have figured out by the end of my workday is typically going to be the first thing that I have to talk to the following morning. And I also accepted, again, holding more space for myself. I can still be working on something during that stand up where we're providing updates. I don't have to always have to have it sorted out in advance of those meetings that start at 8 or at 7:30, depending on, the client.
Okay, I think I understand better what you're contending with here. And it sounds like you have a bad case of one more thingitis.
Sure do. Or sure, I should say, sure have historically. I'm not going to say I'm out of the woods on that one either, but I would say that I've made some progress.
It's hard to have boundaries, especially when you have the remote work or unstructured time. You have to be the one to hold yourself accountable to, like, when you have to leave work and they're turning out the lights because it's a physical office, or there's someone starting to vacuum in the other room. Like, there's these signs, oh, hey, it's this time and we better get out of here, or I'm going to hit traffic or something. Like, but yeah, when you're working for yourself, it's like the lines are blurred. It's a more porous boundary, and it becomes easier for us to justify, yeah, just do one more thing, or let me keep going. I'm almost there. When we tell ourselves that, we're deluding ourselves into thinking we're on this precipice of a discovery and we're about to get there. In my experience, especially at the end of the day, when we're past 3 o'clock and we're crashing in our energy, this is kind of a typical pattern for people and with med crashes too. We're not functioning at our peak usually. I mean, I don't know how many of you out there actually like really on fire at like 5 o'clock or 4:30. Usually we're trying to just finish out and get through and like get to the end. Sometimes we might have a resurgence of energy that comes back, but we have to frame this in diminishing returns, like economic language, because the more we're putting in, it's not that we're getting more out of it. We're actually getting less. It's taking us more time. It's harder to do. We're investing more effort and we're getting less productivity out of it. And so any more squeezes that we're trying to get out of the sponge, which is our brain, to get more, we've already drained it. These are just drops now. They're not getting actually more. So it's a good thing to kind of tell yourself, realize that, like you said, be honest with yourself. And if you're afraid of, well, if I don't do this now, I'll forget, the strategy you also mentioned was leave yourself some breadcrumbs, leave yourself some notes or something, leave it in a halfway done spot so you can come back to it later and say, oh, I know tomorrow I'm going to start right back up at this spot. I left myself a little note. That way you won't forget. You're not relying on your working memory. The other thing that I haven't mentioned in the last strategy here with this, I would say, is find a bookend, find a stopping activity or something that is a forcing function to this. So if you know, hey, I tend to do this, I'm going to extend my workday and tend to keep working on this project, and this always happens. Well, what can you do? You know, join a group fitness class, or say you have to be somewhere at the end of this time, because that provides that, like, I have to get this done at this time, or else I'm gonna, like, I kind of like, it forces you to leave, to get up, to transition. That's the struggle for us with ADHD, is the transitions. I'm engaged. It took me, oftentimes people are thinking in their mind, it took me so long to get started on this thing, and now I won't get back to it. I'm afraid I won't get back to it. So I just got to keep going, got to keep going, got to keep going. But we can burn ourselves out, right? Let's be honest. If we keep going too long past that point of diminishing returns, we end up just sacrificing productivity the next day, or worse, getting our brain more activated into the evening, which then does what? It hurts our ability to fall asleep later, especially if you don't have a satisfactory outcome, right? Like, let's say you, at the end of the workday, you had that thought of, oh, just one more thing, I'm almost there. And then you keep trying, and then you don't get it. And now you're feeling kind of bad about yourself and how productive you were. You're like, man, I was right there. And then I worked another couple hours, and now I'm starving. And now it's 8 o'clock. And now I need to start winding down. And I didn't get to do anything fun. And guess what? Now your brain is super activated, and it's feeling like crap because you didn't get the thing done that you wanted to. And now you're not going to be able to sleep because now you're worried about all these things for the next day.
And the other issue there too is that if you do start approaching burnout, then you have this new form of stress where you feel like you were taking too long to get things done. You literally can't. You're burned out, but you now feel that you have to work more to offset how you feel you should be able to get your work done during your workday. So it does require a little bit of vigilance to try and course correct, so you don't find yourself in a situation where you realize that you should have been taking care of yourself months into it or years.
You could have been taking better care of yourself.
Yes, important. So we're going to retiring that word. There's a few words I'm trying to retire from my vocabulary. And one other thing I want to point out, just because we had Meredith Carter on an episode a while back, but also trying to structure in transition times. So making it so that you have these little barriers so that when you do have to transition, they feel less jarring.
Some buffer times.
Exactly. Because I think there was a joke on Instagram, like, within the last 3 years, I don't know, time's a circle, but it's talking about somebody struggling with how are they expected to have to get anything done when they have a meeting at 4. Like, how are they supposed to do anything over the course of their day? In that same vein of, if I'm struggling to get started, this is just going to be a shock to my system. So
you don't know how many clients have told me that. And I've experienced that anticipatory anxiety too, where you have something in the afternoon or later in the day, and maybe it's a big meeting or some obligation, a presentation or report due or whatever the thing is. And then now you're like, your brain's fighting with itself. It's like, do I have time to do the other things? Or if I get started in this thing, then will it distract me and I won't be ready for this thing? Or maybe I'll get too engrossed in this. And then before I know it, that meeting will be there, and will I be late to the meeting? And like, you just play these scenarios in your mind. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, for us, like, yeah, if we balance, we can work on embracing the hyper focus, because it can be an awesome strength when we utilize it contextually in the right way, right? In the ways that are beneficial and constructive. But what we want to try to do is balance our energy so we can get into these, I'd say, like, hyper focused or flow state, as a lot of the research talks about. Like, I'll get into a flow state for a sprint or a period of time. Maybe it's like an hour and a half. But it's good to weave in some planned breaks and some buffers in there and actively transition. For a lot of people, the transition has to be something that is environmental like some cue in your environment, whether that's a timer, an alarm, a cue in the day, like it's this time of the day. You know, if you have a pet, like I got to go walk the dog at this time. I got to feed the dog. Like there's some kind of environmental cue that gets you out of that thing. Or you can even have someone come remind you or tell you, like nudge you, hey, follow up with me, or let's schedule a meeting to check in on this thing. And then you work to that point and then you hop on that meeting. So it can create those transitionary activities, do some of those things and get in the pattern of like not overextending yourself. You'll amaze yourself to feel that you'll feel better. We trick ourselves into thinking we're more productive when we just burn ourselves out and work. You will be much more productive and stave off burnout if you work in these dedicated sprints and then take a nice break.
I've had some sort of analogy for engines and how they require maintenance. And for example, if you were driving an automatic, or not an automatic, a manual, that you'd have to actually shift and you have to have structure and plans because you can't just be revving in first gear the entire time. I'm having a hard time cobbling it together in a way that has a satisfying soundbite. So we'll just have to leave that as it is.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it real quick. So,
okay.
So if we're sitting there with our 1 foot on the brake and 1 foot on the gas, we're not going to get going anywhere. And that's what our brain does a lot of times when we're anticipating that meeting that's approaching later in the day. Is it's like it has 1 foot on the brake and 1 foot on the gas. We're fighting our own brain of, should I start? Should I start now? Am I going to start? I'm not started, but I could start. No, I'm going to start a little. No, still braking, right? We're in that mode. Now we got to shift, right? So now we got to engage the clutch. We got to shift, get into first gear. This is the manual analogy, manual car. And first gear is a low gear. So we get started, right? We do a few things that are leading towards that bigger priority task. We get going. Then we engage the clutch. We shift into the second gear, right? And we keep moving through, but we can always come back to neutral and coast at different times. So if we were driving up a mountain, we can come back to coasting. Like we've went up the hill, now we're coasting down. Stay off some of those brakes, let ourselves coast until we hit the next turn, right? Then we're braking, we're easing back in. That's kind of the flow and structure. We can't have our foot on the gas the entire time and never shift. We do have to downshift. We have to downshift in our energy. And we have to know when is the right time to hit that gas. Because if we hit the gas and we're trying to round a corner too fast, we flip off and roll down the canyon. We get out of control. There's my shot at this analogy.
I like it. Plus, you can't always be flooring it. You're going to ruin your engine.
Yeah, you'll burn out that clutch.
Exactly. Well, Aaron, we did it. I think some of the questions I have, we went maybe one or two, and I think they are sort of derivative, for lack of a better word, of the stuff that we've actually already talked about across this episode. I know that this is under the umbrella of Attention Different, but all the same, where could we find you?
So you can find me at Potential Within Reach. That's my company. Also, Attention Different. I'm podcast host over there. So if you need some individual coaching or want to work with someone like myself, reach out to me. You can just look up potentialwithinreach.com, and I do a free 30-minute consultation just to see if it's the right fit for you and if you want to work with a coach like me.
Perfect. I think for the future, I might try to see if I can get my feelers out there and see if we can get folks submitting their own questions to be answered, because we could kind of come back to this as part of an ongoing series from time to time.
That'd be great. Yeah. Tap your network and followers and ask any questions. Shoot, I'm game for it. I love this.
Perfect. I'll try to tee that up so that they're kind of gathered within a day or two when we decide to record next.
Well, I'm not judging you even if you're late. It's all good, man.
That is the point. We're not any less of it. Sometimes it just takes a while to get the official word on what's going on.
Well, thanks for having me on, Devin.
Absolutely. And thank you for being available. As always, my name is Devin Pitts-Rogers, and this has been another episode of Late Not Less. Talk to y'all, or I guess talk at y'all soon.